So let's put all this together and see what we got going on, okay? We have a midnight cry going out at midnight, which is Hanukkah. We have God making a decision on Day of Atonement. The first year of the tribulation would be the seals, the fourth year is the trumpets, the sixth year would be the thunders, and the seventh year would be the bowl judgments or the vial judgments. So looking at the Shemitah and or Jubilee years, we have a 7-year Jubilee cycle running right here for the tribulation period. This is called Daniel's 70th week. It was one of the prophecies he gave. He said the Messiah would be cut off after 60 weeks, but God told the Jews they had 70 weeks of punishment, okay? This goes back to the forgive thy brother 70 times 7, all right? So this is the 70th week that they have to complete. And within this 7-year Shemitah cycle, we have Shemitahs and or Jubilee years running concurrently with the 4 Rapture years. These dots right here, these represent the harvest cycles in which Jesus will get his bride, his saints, and his elect. This entire thing represents the Gentile bride. This is the harvest of the Jewish bride, the harvest of the martyred saints, and the harvest of the elect. Now, if you take this entire 7-year period and lay it on top of this first year, you're going to see an exact parallel. These first 2 dots represent the first fruits. This represents the main harvest, and this represents the gleanings. The body of Christ is divided into 3 groups. We have disciples, bishops, and elders. The disciples, they are the ones being saved in spirit. Now, they are not earning their salvation. They're just going through the process and running their race and walking it out for the salvation of their spirits. The bishops are walking out the process for the salvation of their souls. The elders are the ones who either have already received a new body or they are getting ready to receive their new body right as the tribulation is about to start. We are told by John in the book of Revelation that the elders are already seated on the throne before these seals are opened. So the elders are already in heaven before the Antichrist is loosed. Now going back to our 4 watches, we have the 4th watch at Hanukkah, the 2nd watch at Pentecost, the 1st watch at Passover, okay? So here we see our 2 brides, Gentile bride and Jewish bride, being taken in the 4th watch from Hanukkah to Hanukkah, and we have the midnight cry going out at Hanukkah, all right? And the martyred saints right here are being taken at the 2nd watch, that new Pentecost which runs into tabernacles. And the elect up here are being taken at Passover. Now, the reason why Jesus is doing this is because, one, these vials right here are going to make the earth uninhabitable, okay? So he's got to come get the elect. Jesus said, unless those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Now, the second reason he's doing this is because Jesus said when he gets ready to return at the second coming, he's going to gather his elect from one end of heaven to the other. He's not gathering them from earth. If you look in Matthew, the Olivet Discourse, he's going to gather his elect from the 4 winds of heaven. So what we ultimately end up with are 4 gatherings for the 4th watch, 2-part first fruit, main harvest, and gleanings. We have 2 gatherings for this Pentecost right here. And we have 1 gathering for this Passover, the 4, 2, and 1. We keep seeing that pattern over and over and over again because God is a God of patterns and a God of order, not a God of chaos. Okay? So we see these 2 groups right here, the 2 brides. These are the only 2 groups that qualify for the glorified bodies. Okay? By the time we get here, these people will only be qualified for either a spirit body or a flesh body. And by the time we get to the last year, these people are only qualified for a new flesh body. Now remember, because we're using this right here as a Pentecost, we're going to use the 10 days associated with that tabernacles. Remember, go back to the calendar I showed you. When we use it as a Pentecost, we have to use these 10 days right here. But at the second coming, we will use these 10 days from trumpets to atonement. And I'll show you that in more detail in a minute. And when Jesus returns at the second coming, he's going to separate these sheep from the goats, like I was showing you with the teenagers a while ago. Now, because people are going to be dying from the midpoint all the way to the end, Jesus is going to send 3 angels out from right here all the way until the second coming. These 3 angels are going to go out and spread the gospel and warn people not to take the mark of the beast. All right? So you have the elect who are being protected in a safe place. They're not going out and spreading the gospel. God's people are dying as martyrs at this point. They can't go out and spread the gospel. So these 3 angels are they're going to come and do that for him. Now, at the end, like I said before, if there's anyone left at the end, Jesus will separate the sheep and the goats. Those who want to join him and repent of their sin will be allowed to enter into the kingdom. And those are the sheep. The goats who reject him will be sent to the lake of fire. So anytime you see fleeing or escaping in the Bible, it will happen on one of these 3 feast days: Passover, Pentecost, or Tabernacles. These are the 3 times a year that the Hebrew or Israelite men were required to appear before God in Jerusalem. We have Jesus escaping at Hanukkah. We have Moses who fled Egypt at Tabernacles, which is the new Pentecost, and then Moses brought the Israelites out of Egypt at Passover. So at the midpoint of the tribulation period, the Bible tells us that there's going to appear a woman in heaven. He's talking about that constellation Virgo, or what we call the Revelation 12 sign. Now, several things are going to happen when this sign takes place. This sign is going to happen around Feast of Trumpets, and there's a lesser version of the sign that also takes place around Passover, okay? So we have the temple the temple is already rebuilt by this point, okay? What's going to happen around this time frame is that Satan is going to start setting up the abomination of desolation. And God told the elect, the group of elect is who he's talking to. He said, look, at this midpoint, when this sign takes place, the Revelation 12 sign, he said, I want you to flee into the wilderness, all right? This is a reference back to Luke. I think it's Luke chapter 21, where he told them to flee. Flee the housetops, don't take anything with you. And it's a reference back to 70 A.D. when the Romans came in and sieged Jerusalem. It's going to happen again. And he's telling them, look, I want you to flee at this point. So when they see this sign, they're going to start fleeing. And this is the 1260 days that this group will get protected. All right? And then you have this group being protected right here for 1260 days. Now, this constellation Virgo represents 2 things. It represents the nation of Israel. It also represents Mary, the mother of Jesus. So what this sign, this Revelation 12 sign, is pointing to is the abomination of desolation itself, okay? Because part of the sign says that the red dragon tried to snatch the baby as it was being born, but God raptured or harpazoed that baby into heaven to keep it away from the red dragon, who is Satan. And Satan's tail drew 1/3 of the angels down with him. He's referencing the book of Genesis, where the fallen angels came down and mated with the women, okay? The reason why Jesus has this group escaping at mid-trib and fleeing into the wilderness is because he's reminding his Jews of the Exodus from Egypt, the covenant at Mount Sinai, and the promised land of Israel. Okay, so here we see that parallel of an escape, going out into the wilderness and then crossing over into the promised land, which is the millennial reign of Christ. He's also referencing Mary and Joseph and how they had to flee from Herod. He's just constantly reminding them of the escape from Egypt in every way possible. Okay, so Satan's going to start setting up the abomination of desolation here, but it will not be completed until here. Now, the Hebrews or the Israelites are required to appear before God 3 times a year, remember? So they're going to be going to the temple throughout this year, and they're going to be seeing this object being set up, and they're going to be fleeing at different times. But what Jesus is saying is, look, you have 1260 days where I will protect you. It just so happens that one group is going to go sooner than another one. And remember, spiritually speaking, we escape from Egypt in our spirit. We wander through the wilderness in our soul, and we enter the promised land of health, wealth, and prosperity with our new body. Now let's go back and finish the book of Revelation and see what all this looks like in terms of the timeline. At the beginning, we have the 7 letters to the 7 churches representing the church age. Once that church age is over, John, representing the first fruits of the Gentile bride, sees a menorah. He also sees a lamb like it has been slain. What this represents is the 4th watch at Hanukkah, and the first group of the elect have already been taken to witness the seals being opened. Shortly thereafter, he sees a great multitude in heaven. This is the main harvest. So after John tells us what's going on in heaven, he turns around and tells us what's going on down here on the earth. And he tells us about these 2 witnesses that are going out to testify to all the earth, and they will witness for 1,260 days. So go back to this first 40-day gathering right here. I was telling you earlier that this group would be gathered and then they would ascend 40 days later. But the 40 days are divided into 2 parts, the 7 days plus the 33 until the dedication. And then there would be another 7 days right here where the 3 different adult groups were actually ascending. If you read the history of Jesus and his ascension, it's worded very vaguely. It's worded in such a way that it appears as though he waited 7 days and then he was gone 40 days later, or he walked the earth for 40 days and then there was an additional 7 days before he left. That's done on purpose to show us this right here. And I showed you during those 7 days, 4, 5, 6, 7, how he would divide up the groups and take us by ages. All right, so the first 7 days right here would be the children, and then the 3 final days for the adults. And then there would be 33 days, and then this first group would ascend. Here we see a parallel to Lazarus. Remember when Jesus waited 4 days to get Lazarus? Here are the 4 days right here where he's gathering the children, so the adults have to wait 4 days. All right? Now, the reason I bring all this up is because if Jesus is going to gather between somewhere around May the 16th or 17th into May the 23rd, to the 24th for this first group right here, then 40 days later takes us to that July the 4th through the 11th that I was telling you about. That's 40 days difference from May to July. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the 2 witnesses would have to start their testimony around July the 11th in order to go 1,260 days and then die right here around this December the 21st and then resurrect around Christmas Day. And as always, please don't forget the 24 to 48 hours for time zones. I'm just giving y'all approximate dates here. So while the two witnesses are testifying, this white horse rider is going to go out. This white horse rider is a man who is possessed by Satan. He's going to be some type of political leader who is going to rule and reign on the earth for 3.5 years. We also see a dual application of the white horse rider, because not only does it represent the counterfeit of Satan coming, but it also represents Jesus coming to get his bride, because later we see Jesus on a white horse coming back with his people. Now Jesus said he would keep us from the hour of trial, those who are saved and those who were faithful. And the hour of trial was coming upon the whole world to test those who either don't believe or said they believe but didn't live the lifestyle that God called us to live. That 7 years, that hour of trial that he's referring to is the 7-year tribulation. So when the Bible talks about how there's going to be 30 minutes of silence in heaven, he's referring to 3.5 years. So after this first rapture, there's 30 minutes of silence, 3.5 years, where individuals can get saved, but earth is not going to hear from God as a whole, okay? And then it happens again in the second half after this group is taken. So there's two 30-minute segments where earth will not hear from God or be protected by God, is what I'm trying to say here. We also see that 30 minutes referenced back to Day of Atonement. Now, on Day of Atonement, the people would stand outside and wait on the priest to go into the Holy of Holies. And he would present the offerings and sacrifices to God and ask for forgiveness of sins. And they would have to wait about 30 minutes for God to give his decision as to whether or not he was going to bless them or whether or not they would go into some type of chastisement or judgment. Okay, so when we see that 30 minutes of silence in heaven, he's referring back to the Day of Atonement as well. Now guys, right here at mid-trib, we have a lot going on, okay? This is where Satan is going to show up. This man right here, this is a man possessed by Satan. This is actually Satan in the flesh. He's going to show up, he's going to do his mock resurrection around Easter time, and he's going to rule and reign for the 3.5 years until Jesus returns. Once the two brides are taken, the two witnesses are no longer needed. So these fallen angels that come out of the abyss at the fifth trumpet are going to make war with these two witnesses, and they're going to overcome them, and Satan along with these fallen angels are going to kill the two witnesses. 3.5 days later, the two witnesses will resurrect and ascend into heaven in front of everybody. Now, once this happens, Satan is going to set up the he's already setting it up back here. He's going to complete it or take it to a whole nother level by going into the temple of God and sitting on the throne claiming that he is God. This abomination that causes desolation is by this point in time going to will have caused the entire group of people to start fleeing from Satan, and they will keep fleeing all throughout the remaining 3.5 years. And don't forget, right here where Satan sits in the temple of God claiming to be God, this is Christmas time. This is when the Jews celebrate their Hanukkah. So God is not only telling them, hey, you have the wrong date for Hanukkah, and I'm going to let the counterfeit come, but you have Satan, this narcissistic pig, putting himself on the altar, claiming that he's God, and this goes all the way back to the Maccabean revolt and the original Hanukkah and the abomination of desolation where Antiochus Epiphanes put that pig on the altar and all of that. That's what God is alluding to here. And just what makes it so bad, y'all, is the fact that Satan is actually going to let people believe that he is the second advent of Christ. And guys, I apologize. I know this is getting messy, but that's why I'm trying to use different colors. Also right here, we're going to have these 3 unclean spirits that go out like frogs. representing Christmas, Easter, and Halloween, that are going to gather everybody together for the Battle of Armageddon. So once Satan shows up, this Antichrist is going to join forces with the false prophet, who is the Roman Catholic Pope, and together they are going to endorse Satan as the new world leader of the NWO. When you see the beast in Revelation that has 7 heads and 10 crowns or 10 horns, that just represents the 7 continents ruled by 10 kings over 10 different territories.